Good evening, everyone. I'm Colin Slight. I feel like a company called the Realisation Group, and we supply outsourced marketing services to the Test People. So, to all intents and purposes, for this evening, I'm the Test People and marketing person. Welcome to Challenges in Mobile Performance Test. This is one of a series of roundtable discussions that start the Test People run around about once a quarter, and this is our second event of 2013. We run these regularly simply to engage with the market, put forward a point of view about topical items that are relevant to what we do, and give our people in our network the opportunity to join in the discussion panel. Sometimes we do these on our own, sometimes we do this with partners. Tonight we're very pleased to be working with Neo on this particular one, and it's going to be Graham and Colin who are going to just give us their insights into the challenges in mobile performance test. Following that, and then a short break where we're going to just get some food, and then we're going to sit back down again and then just open up the discussion to the audience as to their thoughts and insights on the views that Graham and Colin are going to put forward. Over to you guys.
Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. As Colin said, I'll be running through a quick few slides to prompt thought. So I'll be doing a bit of scene setting, make some observations about some things, talk about the challenges that we face, obviously, and then start to outline some of the solutions or the approaches to solving it. Just to give you a bit of background about me. So I'm a director and a principal at the Test People. I primarily focus on performance engineering, so kind of anything from client side to server side. I've got a background in solution architecture, so I kind of know most technology stacks. My first mobile that I had, a picture of it, I loved it dearly, was in 1999. And just to put in context about how far we've come, so my first use of mobile data was in my halls of residence, where I soldered some things together and connected that mobile phone.
Were you a mature student?
I wasn't a mature student. My grey hair allows my youthfulness. And I downloaded this thing out, and it was so long ago that you could dial an 0800 number from a mobile and not get that annoying message. But it was still hundreds of bits per second, and essentially you click a button and you go and make a pizza and come back and it's still hadn't loaded. So the thing was reducing the richness of the experience, taking away the images, relying on what I'd call asynchronous interactions, so sending an email from a client rather than a rich web GUI, and you had to have a lot of patience. So that was my first exposure to mobile performance. So we really want to just run through very quickly the aims of testing, and specifically around performance testing. So when we're testing, we're looking for assurance that things are going to work. We're looking for a bit of understanding to figure out, right, they work, but how do they work under different conditions? How would they work under a particular set of conditions? We might even be looking to endorse some things around the quality of our website, the amount of faults that we encounter, or the performance that we're looking to exercise. So in performance testing specifically, we're looking at the capacity, so how many clients can we service, what speeds can we do that, what is the end user experience like at all these different conditions, and then how does the service react to particular different operating conditions, whether that be a sole condition whereby something is working at a moderately high load for a long time, whether it be business as usual, how does it actually work under the regular ebb and flow of traffic, what happens when a surge occurs, whether we be to do with an event that you have control of, such as a marketing campaign, or whether it is perhaps a denial of service whereby things are completely out of your control, and how is your service going to react to that. So there are a bunch of different things that need to be managed in terms of performance tests in these areas, and I've listed 5 there. There's a few that can be kind of split off many of these things, and they kind of just represent the tips of fairly extensive icebergs below them in terms of how you kind of manage performance within a system. So why is important? Why is mobile important? The top line is that more people are going to be using mobiles for commerce-related activities. So m-commerce sales are going to increase, or the proportion of e-commerce which is done on a mobile will increase from 10% currently or last year up to 20% in the next 5 or so years. And that's kind of against the backdrop of an ever-increasing e-commerce trend. So essentially, because more money is going to be spent via mobile, it's going to be ever more increasingly important to make sure that users have a good experience, and essentially there will be an evolution whereby an evolution of the fittest, whereby if your mobile site isn't performing well for whatever reason, you're going to lose market share or not get the sort of conversions that you need. The incidental factors around mobile use, obviously, everybody's got a mobile. You probably all have a mobile on you right now, and could perhaps do something if you saw my kind of, if your interest wanes from me. But really, you can reap consumer impulse, whether that be prompted by a discussion, whether it be prompted by an advert that somebody sees, whether it be prompted any external factor. The second incidental factor I've noted here is convenience. Ultimately, people like to fill up time that they feel is wasted, whether it be travelling or waiting for any sort of event. So that's the second incidental factor. Mobiles ultimately mostly come now with GPRS, and if not GPRS, the stack will have some sort of locational awareness associated with networks and Wi-Fi signals. So that locational awareness will allow the adverts to be tailored to users it'll add a key context which will again kind of improve conversions and reduce bounce rate if people are seeing things that interest them. And then this is a key one, I believe, it's one of the most powerful connector channels. So in essence, as I mentioned earlier on, you might be invoked to view something because you see some print advertising. You might be invoked to look something up because of a TV advertising campaign. The mobile channel is a connector channel, so it connects somebody's impulse to some sort of information. And this is a key thing, I think, for retail e-commerce. And again, if you aren't able to harness these 4 things, if people have the proximity but don't use it, if they have the need to use it to fill up some wasted time but they choose not to, if they have access to this location information but can't be bothered to put up with your load speed or the time it takes them to transition to the information they need, then it's just a pure waste, and somebody else is going to take advantage of that. So some of the nuances of mobile, it's got all these benefits, all these opportunities for businesses to reap. But there are some challenges as well. So obviously people have got fairly short attention spans, and if you work in web performance engineering, you will have stats in your head around if somebody doesn't see some sort of action within 2 seconds, then they'll be a little bit annoyed. If they don't see some sort of progress indicator, their attention will be grabbed. But if nothing is happening within 10 seconds, there's a physiological reason why they will context shift and start to do something else. And those sorts of things play equally in the mobile arena, but obviously we've got far more lags to deal with. I've got this fairly cryptic second point, which is I, who, deja vu. So for the last 15, 20 years, people have been battling against Internet Explorer, and as soon as it was released, it was kind of out of date. And so people kind of had to start to tailor a two-tier web. So that for the web that was for IE6, which was prevalent in federal government institutions, public sector perhaps, and then the consumer-orientated richer web. We have to return to that now. I mean, just as IE6 is going out and just as IE10 and IE11 are starting to take a foothold, we need to come back to this sort of tiered architecture, this sort of different experiences based upon what are the new lowest common denominators. So you have obviously a range of browsers. So you've got the Android browser, you've got Chrome, you've got the Safari mobile, you've got a multitude, and I could probably list 20. And then overlay that onto a multitude of different hardware platforms as well. And you'll all be aware of those, but you can kind of think of some of the more left field things like Kindle Fires or PlayStation 3s. These are all things which introduce complexity into the kind of landscape of who you're trying to target. And remember, we're trying to create here a rich and compelling experience in order to ensure that experience is consistent and equally rich across the board. It's a really, really difficult thing to balance all the capabilities of these browsers, hardware and networks, which I've come on to there, in order to create something which is consistent. A second fairly cryptic point is form factor versus pixel count. Again, not only do we need to manage for the right size screen, but now we find out that the smaller screens have actually got more pixels than that kind of big TV we've got in the corner of our room with things like Retina display inside the Apple set of products. So when we design things, are we designing things for a more basic kind of smaller form factor, or do we take it the other side of things and put some fairly large graphics in there in order to make it look really, really good on these high pixel density hardware? Obviously, the solution is to do both, but how do we do that in a cost-effective way? And the other nuance of mobile, which I like to call out, is power management, and really that's something which kind of sits behind a lot of these design decisions, because ultimately the phone is meant to be something which, well, ultimately there is a conflict of interest there whereby people want high-performing phones, but obviously they want phones that will last for 24 hours or beyond. And ultimately, decisions are made on your behalf. You may not know about it, but decisions are made on your behalf by networks, by your phones, to kind of reduce the fidelity of the service that you get from your hardware. And it's fine. You might make kind of purchasing decisions based upon the fact that my iPhone doesn't work very well, or I don't like the Android platform. That could well be to do with the implicit power management functions of these platforms. As a consumer, it's great to be able to have that choice. As a mobile web performance engineer, you kind of need to work around what you're given and make sure that whatever platform your application or website is rendered on, that it is done again in a really compelling and rich way. So the challenges. I'll kick off with some statistics just to base obviously some of the implications. So 85% of the users expect the mobile web to be just as fast as the desktop. It's really, really confusing for users to have something that looks like, again, mobile phones and tablets are designed in a way which is transferable and familiar to users. Good user experience is kind of based on consistency and things doing the right thing. So it's not surprising that so many people expect mobile web to be just as fast as the desktop. And they probably will expect perhaps that an iPad will perform the same as an iPhone, which will perform the same as an Android phone, and there are distinct differences between those platforms. 3/4 of people would kind of bounce a site if it takes more than 5 seconds to load. So kind of, I think this is slightly a diversion from a website where people can perhaps have a little bit more attention on a website. I know websites should load in less than 2 seconds or at least show some action, but with mobile, the challenge is that content doesn't get rendered very quickly at all, and so it's not like you can get a lot of content, and that's for reasons about the network and the rendering path of content. But you're far more likely to hit a website on a mobile that will take more than 5 seconds to load than you are on a desktop. Over half of people have a problem. They recognise that. And a third of those will cite slow performance, but importantly, kind of half will not return. So whenever if you kind of go onto an unoptimized mobile site, you could effectively be disenfranchising a quarter of all users if you don't have the kind of appropriate performance in mind. So that's a really key thing. And the thing about mobiles is that they'll kind of go on to the next one, just as in web, but probably they might stick with whoever works the best. And the challenge again with mobile is that a lot of the time, if you're the first person that they choose, they will have the worst network impact on your experience. So really reducing the amount of time that your site gets to turn up is imperative. So the implications of all these things, of the nuances of the mobile web, is that everybody kind of takes a step down. It makes it ever more important for you to do client-side performance engineering. You can no longer rely upon a fairly robust computer with 3 gigabytes of RAM, choose a number randomly, whatever Windows needs these days. You can't rely on the fact that it's going to have an Intel processor which will do so many cycles per clock. You really need to look at what you're asking your platform to do in order to understand what that would look like when it's accessed on the variety of platforms that are out there. You need to make some careful choices around choosing native applications versus a mobile web. I see a lot of vendors who will ask for a mobile website to be created, a native mobile application, and what they get back looks great, but when we come to test it, what has actually happened is that they've just encapsulated a mobile site into a native app to make a hybrid app. So this kind of makes the cost of that vendor a lot less, because they just have to do a mobile web application, a mobile website, and then kind of encapsulate it in some sort of loose native libraries. When it comes to actually running it from a performance perspective, you don't get any of the benefits of having a native application. It will be running the same sort of browser libraries behind the scenes, and hence you'll need to apply the web performance orientated best practices. You really need to manage your bounce rate and maintain a kind of conversion rates and pay particular attention to these metrics. So obviously in all good reviews and monitoring tools at the moment, you will have that breakdown around the browser that's accessing your site, the time it took to load, the time it took to render, and then obviously how many people bounced, at which point in the interaction did they bounce, and what your conversion rate is. I see a lot of disparity between desktop, tablet and mobile conversion and bounce rates in our clients at the moment, and they kind of recognise that too, and that's the kind of primary measurable way in which they foster good mobile performance. And then also there's the changing workload and timings of ever-increasing visitor numbers. One of the implications of having that convenience is that users will use their or access your site, your service over a far broader range of times. So formerly people would perhaps be watching TV late at night and they packed away their laptop, their desktop was upstairs, they wouldn't think of start browsing the internet. But now they've got a phone in their pocket, now they've got an iPad down the side of the sofa. This is the sort of usage that we're kind of seeing more and more. And from a performance perspective, from an ops perspective, that means that you get less and less downtime, you get less and less opportunity to do all the things that you need to do in the middle of the night. So the workload and the timings of how users use your site is going to change as more people use mobile, as those figures, those predictions around m-commerce figures come about. So I'm skipping around these slides. Nobody's asking any questions, so I'm going to plough on. But please shout. So our approach to mobile performance testing, I think I've talked about most of these things already. The first thing to do, I think, is single client analysis. So actually looking in a very isolated way about what is happening on the client side during the workflows, the standard sorts of workloads that you put through it, and really understanding that this kind of requires not just web developers, but people who've got a real interest in browsers, in mobile hardware, subject matter experts to understand how a website that works perfectly well on a desktop doesn't work so well on a mobile, even when they've stripped out X, Y, Z because they think that they are superfluous. People who actually understand what the rendering pipeline of browsers are and how that kind of applies to mobiles. I'm going to keep this really, really light, but if you do have any technical questions around these sorts of concepts, please feel free to shout me afterwards, because I don't want to bore you all with such subjects. So looking at areas that deviate from best practice, which is generally known but is ever so more important in the mobile space. I kind of consider best practices not only as making user experience good, but as long as you kind of follow them, most of them will immunize you against these problems, these slowdowns which are caused by networks and battery performance and the processing power of mobile sites. And then kind of obviously, with all testing, rate the risks of what you can see. So obviously you could say that this site will not work on that particular antiquated hardware, this site will not work particularly well on BlackBerries, but you might choose to ignore that and say, well, most of my consumer base is not going to be accessing it on BlackBerries. We're focusing on iOS, we're focusing on Android 2.3 and above, and actually put some sensibility around what should be worked on and what should be improved. And that's really the basis for a lot of performance engineering. It's not necessarily catering for every single eventuality, it's actually understanding the risks which are posed by the characteristics of the service that you're monitoring or you're testing, and then applying some sort of business-oriented logic as to the opportunities and risks that those characteristics represent. The second thing that we do is augment the TVM. So the TVM is a transaction volume model. So that is actually representing how you expect your site to be accessed, the number of users, what they're doing, how long they spend on the site, what workflows, what journeys are they taking through. And we can overlay some of the observations and some of the thinking that we've got around how the nuances of our mobile clients will overlay onto the rest of the population of our TVM. So once we kind of make these projections of behaviour at scale, we can test them. We can look at how these additional mobile users will, perhaps they'll scale linearly, perhaps they'll be exactly like regular browsers in terms of how responsive the website, what the capacity is, but some of the nuances in terms of the network stack and how quickly it gets to render can introduce subtleties that will then misfoot the capacity that you've actually got. So network connections can exist for longer. It can take longer to download things. Lost packets can put additional load on your web server, and so all these things can kind of misstep the way in which the web server is meant to work, and create a different behaviour than that was expected. If you do kind of get this far, then the use of hybrid testing is really, really good as well. So actually putting into place a synthetic load generator, which has kind of got this model incorporated into it, but actually then putting a few real clients, whether they be emulators, although I kind of shy away from emulators because you're not actually getting the network stack incorporated. Really, real hardware with real network connections is the best thing here to give you that sort of subjective view of, against the backdrop of a really busy website, is my mobile web version still functioning and still giving me this rich experience. And then the final thing, which again I think is really, really important, is to monitor this in the wild. You're only going to get visibility of the diversity of devices and browsers and all these things that you expect in the wild. That's the only practical way at the moment to see such diversity. So mobile performance testing, the kind of cornerstone for seeing this thing is getting some real user monitoring in. It doesn't need to be extensive. It doesn't need to be looking at heat maps and looking at where users are dragging their finger and things like that. It can be as simple as Google Analytics. It's something I rely on quite a lot. It doesn't necessarily need to be integrated with some sort of additional monitoring framework, although that's obviously beneficial, but it can confirm your projections and it can allow you to see whether or not the model that you've outlined is actually coming to bear, whether the behaviours that you test on a single unit base then scale up consistently in your web across the variety of platforms, but also the varieties of workloads that your web server is experiencing. The great thing is that you'll be able to kind of pinpoint and find out where the discrepancies or the variations away from that is, and hopefully those discrepancies will fall right within those platforms you've chosen to not favour, such as the BlackBerry or those kind of edge case mobile platforms. And equally, when you do find out that a great many people use BlackBerry, it'll allow you then to pinpoint the improvements for that and then track those improvements going forward. So I'm aware that I skipped through it, but I was expecting some hands up and some questions.
No, I think, well, to be honest, Colin, I think we'll leave that to the discussion because people are going to have some views as to where the world is now with respect to mobile and some comments to make about not only where it is now but where it's going. I mean, I certainly have wanted to. I think probably now if we Graham from Neotys says a few words and about where Neil fits into the mobile performance landscape.
Okay.
Seamless transition.
Yeah.
Then that will set the scene for hopefully what an interesting discussion beyond.
I think when a plan comes together. Anyway, good to meet you all tonight. My name is Graham Perry from Neotys. Neotys are the developers of the Neoload test tool that we'll talk about in a bit more detail. When I was getting some ideas together for this discussion, I was thinking back to my first job when I left university just a few years ago, which was as a performance tester. And what I was testing was the weapons control system on the Tornado jet fighter. And the problem a jet fighter has is when you're travelling at 700 miles an hour, the pilot can't move that much because of the G-force. And when you're firing rockets, you fire a rocket off this wing, the next rocket you want to fire off the other wing, otherwise it goes belly up, and the cost of performance failure is 500 million quid and a big hole in the ground. So it's something you need to avoid at all costs. And all traditional websites have a cost of performance failure. And as Colin alluded, will people go elsewhere? Will they buy less? Will they tell the world on Twitter? Twitter's social media is quite an interesting thing. I don't know if you remember a few years ago, Tesco advertised the new iPad, and instead of £250, I think they advertised it at £39.99, and people were buying them and immediately going on Twitter and telling their friends. And the traffic that came through Tesco just brought the service down. It wasn't just for that particular site, it was the whole grocery as well. So it cost them an awful lot of money, and they didn't actually honour the $39.99 anyway. But, so social media can be quite powerful for driving traffic to your website for the wrong reasons. So a lot of people over the years have been testing traditional desktop websites, doing the performance testing of that. But we're not finding the same things for mobile, and I'd like to discuss this later on, because I'd be interested to know what people's views are of mobile performance testing. As Colin mentioned, the expectation of a mobile user is high, but the delivery challenges of getting content to a mobile are quite significant. A lot of people think, well, we've got a desktop, let's go mobile, and it's going to be straightforward, and that's never been the case. The feedback I'm getting from people who've done this, either they make some compromise of having just displaying the traditional website to the mobile users, or they set up a separate mobile website that's slightly different. But there is a performance impact along the delivery chain for this, and it's quite significant. Colin mentioned that I think Strange Loop do various statistics as to how people react if they have to wait on a mobile device. I'm not sure, some of that if you wanted to buy a book from Amazon and the site took 6 seconds rather than 2 seconds, you'd still buy your book from Amazon. But there are some websites where you're just browsing around, and people do definitely move along. Some interesting stats I found last week is that what is the behavioural impact of people waiting on a mobile device? 62% behave normally. This is obviously American, because in Britain everybody would be totally unfazed by this. 23% curse, 11% scream, and I'm a screamer, but 4% throw their mobile phones away or at something. That's 1 in 25. So your shiny new website may have that impact on someone. And there are nearly 25 people in here, so statistically, one of you is a thrower, or me. So some of the things with mobile, if you look here, on a desktop, you've got a straight connection straight into a server. You may have a few hops, but it's a very stable link there. On mobile, you're going through a local mast that's going through the gateway and into the internet. But the position or the distance between you and the mast can be quite significant. I did a quick ping test in my house the other week because I was bored. And in one side of the house, I forget how many milliseconds the ping was, it's about 150. The other side, it was 300 milliseconds, and that's just in the space of 20 yards. And most internet traffic is two-way traffic, so you've got doubling the latency delay. So there's a lot of factors around mobile that are totally out of your control, but it has an impact on your users. And we talked about network. Packet loss is quite a significant one. You could be losing up to 80% of the information that's sent to your mobile users. Could be having to be resent That also has an effect on the rest of depending on how you've set your server up. But TCP/IP has a way of downgrading the link if it sees a high packet loss. So you might have a shiny new 4G connection, but that might be slowly being detuned because of the poor performance of where you are. Multiple devices. Everybody's got lots of devices to support. It's very difficult. Device limitations, less powerful, smaller cache, and then impact on servers. Generally, depending on how you set your server up, if a mobile device connects to your server and loses the signal, the mobile device will pick up another connection, but the server may still have the old connection open. So if you get lots of dropped packets, your server will start deteriorating, and that you see that quite a lot in a website that has mobile and traditional desktop hits as well. So it's can be quite significant. So in terms of looking at mobile performance, you've got network conditions, you've got the back-end performance, how's your server and your back-end devices, how they're coping, your device type, how does that behave, what sort of app have you got, native, hybrid or native, hybrid or HTML, and what sort of web server policies have you set up on to manage all this and to serve up the information. So in terms of Neotys, where do we fit into this picture? We were a development company, and we had 4 developers around about 2004 who were developing a bespoke application, and it needed performance testing. They were looking for something that was fast to script, it didn't break the bank, and you could test the latest technologies. And somewhere in between, being French, somewhere in between the 2-hour lunch breaks, the generous holiday allowance and the general strike, they found time to develop what we now call Neoload. And this is a load testing tool. It was initially designed to test web traffic, standard web. It's scriptless. What that means is you see the user's view and you click on a screen as a user would. So you're operating in a very native fashion, and it captures that traffic. And what we can do is generate, when we do a performance test, we can generate that load either internally within your own infrastructure or from the cloud. A lot of online gaming companies, for example, want to simulate traffic coming in from Spain to one of their servers. So there's a geographic aspect to what they do. So you can do that from the cloud. Initially, we started out as desktop, and in the last 18 months, we've migrated to, or extended to mobile, so there's specific features in here for mobile testing. And it's been very, very popular, very successful. We've got over 1,200 customers worldwide. And they tend to be largest customers with lots of transactions on their website, people with big brands that want to protect the brand and deliver the right experience to their users. Online gaming companies are quite critical. So it's across the board, but it tends to be customers where performance is critical to their business. And in terms of what we do, and this is a very simplified view, but there are only 5 steps in terms of what we do with Neoload to replicate traffic on your website. There's the initial setup, there's the scenario capture, which is where you capture the user experience. Scaling that user experience to simulate lots and lots of users, running the test and analysing the results. So in terms of mobile, again this is fairly simple. There are 2 ways of setting the traffic. So if your mobile device can handle proxies, it can send all the traffic through Neoload. So we tap off the traffic and then it goes onto the server. There are certain devices or applications where you can't tap into the proxy. We use a tunneling mode. So all of the mobile cases we can cope with that. One of the key things is one emulation. So you want to simulate a wide area network. What are the network conditions? And with this, you can simulate 3G links, 4G links, 2.5G links, different signal strengths. And so you do a real-life simulation. This is built into Neoload, and people are just discovering what you can do with that. And lastly, we set up the monitoring. So in terms of the back end, you might want to monitor the server, the database, the operating system, the local area network around here. And the next step is just basically simulating what users do. So you will have Neoload sitting on the same network as your device, and you will log onto your account, you'll browse products, you'll place a bet, you'll go to the checkout. But basically, it's just capturing those user interactions. And once we've captured those interactions, we just multiply them up, and it's quite simple. And you get some people that may be logging on, checking their account. They may just be browsing, or they may be logging on, browsing, and then buying. So you basically create these different profiles, and then just simply say how much of your activity do you want for the people who are browsing, how much do you want for the people who are buying, how many are checking their accounts. And basically you just simulate that load, which is what your website would see on a typical day. And once you've done that, you just fire it off. Here I'm showing firing it across the cloud, so it's a real experience. It's coming in through your firewall and into your system, but equally you can generate the load internally and hit your servers from load generated within your organisation. And at the same time, you're monitoring the performance of the infrastructure here. Analysing the results, you can see this in real time, or you can go to it later on, but basically the blue line is the number of users in this example, and you can see how page load response times start varying as the load increases. So in real time you can see where your system is starting to creak and fall apart as the number of users increase. So in a nutshell, what Neoload gives you is the ability to simulate numbers of users, network conditions and transaction types. And using that, you can create tests, you can execute tests very quickly and run the test. And basically, we're just hoping that using this technology, your users won't be experiencing the wrong sort of impact when they throw their phones. Now, after this session, if you want to get in touch with me, I can set up an online demonstration and a discussion. We can go through some of the technology. I didn't want to go through blow by blow because that would bore half the audience, I thought. So give me a shout if you want to do that. And yeah, we have an evaluation where you can download it and try it yourself. So thank you very much for that. I'm genuinely interested in your thoughts about where performance testing fits in mobile, because as I say, some people do it, some people don't, and I'd like to understand what people's experiences are. Well, thank you very much.
Great, thanks, Jim. I made all kinds of notes about stuff that I'm interested in. So I've got one or two questions to ask you. Right, we're going to take just a very short break because we're going to bring some food and topics and get on to the interesting bit, which is what are your views about where things are in the world of mobile technology, how it's being used for commercial and social reasons, and what that means in terms of performance, usage, and so on and so forth. So it's kind of an open agenda, there's people's point of view about where this particular market's going, so kind of looking forward to that. So we'll just quickly refresh our classes, get something to it, and then we'll get on to the interesting bit, which is you guys. One final word though before we move on to that is you probably noticed we're videoing this session because we're kind of looking to maybe reuse some bits of it for marketing purposes or our own research. Therefore, the Chatham House rule does not apply in this room. So if you want to talk about anything which you would be normally under NDA with any one of your clients or your employers, then we will absolutely respect that NDA. So if you want to say a large investment bank rather than naming a company or so on and so forth, then absolutely that is appropriate, given the fact that we'll be videoing the session. Okay. That was me waving.
Do you want to take the question?
I'm happy to take questions whenever.
Fine. Is there much difference in terms of the scripting that you need to do between iOS, Android, BlackBerry? Is there significant difference?
Generally speaking, if it's at the protocol level, there's less difference, but ultimately doing protocol level performance testing these days with how interactive the websites are getting, the rich internet applications as they're called, leveraging Ajax and WebSockets and all these sorts of things, protocol level testing kind of reaches its limitations in that sort of space. If we're talking about some of the more mainstream applications without those features, then generally speaking, the scripting should be fairly similar. The challenge that you've got is that people don't necessarily customize that much between a BlackBerry, an iOS or an Android application, and they can do that for a bunch of reasons. First of all, iOS and Android browsers are all based upon WebKit, which is kind of a common platform. But what you'll find is that Apple and Google will put in their special sauce to make sure that particular things work better in some areas than others. But generally, the interfaces that you use to interact with them, they should all be interactive at kind of HTML level, so your script should work across the board.
So can I just ask? Okay, let's see, we'll kick off now. Can I just ask who in the room is involved in the technical side of testing and development in mobile applications or any other form of software engineering? Can you just put your hands up, anyone who is in performance engineering, if you like, or involved? Okay. And to what extent are others interested in their firms are moving into offering their products and services across a different variety of devices and perhaps going mobile into the course and interested in what that means to them from a quality assurance perspective?
I'll probably be in that bracket. We work for a large travel firm and we're going down. We've just started at the beginning and I manage the QA group for our main travel system. We have an e-commerce site here and we are going down that route, so I'm interested to see, learn more information about it, about some of the difficulties, what it is to do.
Okay, well, we'll come on to that, but I think from our perspective, we're massively interested in your perspective about what you see are the challenges ahead and in terms of the commercial opportunities that are going out there in terms of mobile. How do you think your customers are going to be using mobile devices, so smartphones and tablets going forward in terms of how you're going to engage with your client base? Do you have a view on that?
Yes, please.
Okay, well,
feedback.
Yeah. I think I'd be really interested to hear that. Yeah, please.
Well, as I said, I'm not directly involved in that side of the business, but I know how they're looking to take things forward. So actually booking tours and trips through mobile devices and actually using mobile devices internally for our tour directors on tour. So a lot of information we get from our clients is all paper-based.
Yep.
So they have to write down a lot of information, but to get immediate feedback, they're using tablets and mobile devices more and more. So they're leveraging those devices in terms of in that particular area.
Yeah.
So they want to, and a lot of it is proof of concepts at the moment. It's not wide scale for the company. So we're just looking to see where we can take it. So as I said, I'm not directly involved, but these are some of the activities that are being carried
No,
out.
but that sounds great. So that's a practical example of where this is going for us. What I would have done was, and I haven't got the statistics, was when were smartphones first introduced? 2007. 2007. So that's 2013, so that's 6 years ago when they first introduced. When do we all think they became ubiquitous? This year? 2011? So we're talking 2 years.
Yeah.
Right, 2 years. And the whole world's changed.
I think the industries have overtaken as well. The number of clients that are out there in terms of smartphones, devices versus desktops.
Yes, it's here, wasn't it? There's more mobile devices than desktops, isn't it?
Completely. And then when we're talking about smartphones, that's fine, but what about tablets, you know? So when were tablet devices first introduced? But the point when they started when it was unusual for when you were on the train for somebody not have a tablet on the train on the table, which is how it was like for me on the train on the way down. Everybody was on it. And we were a couple of years. And that's the big thing I took away from what you guys were saying, was the technological challenge is actually immense, because what you're saying is the whole world has transformed itself in the last 2 years.
Yeah,
And as a consequence, we're all up against it because Derek. Yeah, so what Derek was saying was that in the last 2 years, all of a sudden, the business that employs him has adopted this technology in terms of it's starting to become fundamental to the way you do business, which is you're out there running a travel business and you've got parties of consumers who are expecting an excellent experience from your company. And ordinarily, the way you would gauge whether they'd had an excellent experience or not was whether they filled out the questionnaire in the hotel room at the end of the trip, whether they could be bothered or not. And right now, not only do you have that, you're capturing that information as it happens, because you're not only getting it from your customers, but you're getting it from your people in the front line, who are travel representatives who are guiding these parties around, and they're going back and saying, that one didn't work.
It's massively important because
Or we were late.
It's a cycle of collecting that information, because it used to be collected, it goes to a data centre, then it gets transcribed, and then someone would go through it, and now it's regions.
Yeah, and it's gone, and it's gone. And if you don't do that,
And probably more truthful.
Yeah.
yeah, and if you're not doing that, your competitors are going to do that, and then your competitors are going to find out what the end user wants versus what the end user is getting, and they're going to kill it. So you can't not do it. I think the message kind of is you can't not do it. Right? It's all changed, and you can't not do it.
One of the things that Colin said was that he was mentioning that people are using mobiles and smartphones, iPads, later in the evening. You find it down the front, like down the sofa, you want to use it. Derek, are you finding any difference in booking patterns, that people start booking late at night, or is that not coming through yet?
No, that kind of information isn't quite coming through. I'm sure we'll see it soon, but we won't see it.
Okay.
I think that's quite an interesting point in terms of there could be a point where, if I was sat at home and I wanted to book my holiday, or I was at lunchtime out at lunch, I would not do it on a mobile device because it's a significant purchase, it's a big thing, or buying a fridge free or something like that. I just take that bit of extra inconvenience to make sure I did it with a fixed connection on the PC at home. If we get to the point where people are happy to book their big ticket purchases using, just whatever, 60 centimetre square bit of thing, and I think
it wasn't too long ago, Steve, that you wouldn't have wanted to do that on your laptop or anything.
A few years ago, you wouldn't have done something like that on your Wi-Fi at home because you weren't entirely sure that it was.
Why do you not feel compelled to do it on a mobile device?
Just because, for some of the reasons that were mentioned in the presentation, just like ensuring that everything got through, that everything was captured, that it was you got the confirmation back. If it dropped off, then you think, what do I do now? We've got to phone up, I've got to reconfirm somehow. So just for those big ticket things, I'd feel more comfortable. I mean, I'm no way at the forefront of technology. I'm quite wrong in the tooth and stuff like that. But I'm quite comfortable with the idea of using, latest technology and things like that.
Well, Stephen, I mean, how it was with me was because I used to be an IT tech, and I was never confident about what would happen to a transaction if it had bought it halfway through. I used to think, what's happened to that? Has it been backed out? Or is it in flight? And have they taken a payment and I just don't know about it, and I haven't got the confirmation and all that kind of thing? Because you've seen badly written applications that can't handle that kind of point in the decision tree. But then progressively you get more and more confident in your technology. And now when I sit down at my desktop at home, you've got broadband, you've got several megs of bandwidth, so you're thinking, actually, I have a high degree of confidence that when I start this transaction, it's going to go through to a conclusion. I think that's absolutely right with big ticket items, because I wouldn't start a big ticket transaction on a mobile device, particularly if I was travelling, if I wasn't highly confident it was going to go through to a conclusion, because there's nothing worse than getting halfway through it and then losing it.
No, it's not halfway through, it's like 95%.
Yeah, absolutely, even worse.
You browse the different possible options where you can buy.
Well, the industry's got along with not just in terms of mobile, but in terms of web. I mean, I tried to book some flights on Sunday night and got all the way through. The address finding application at the end didn't work. Just hung the whole website and I had to start again. There's absolutely no way I would have attempted that on a mobile.
So imagine you try and do that on mobile, so that thinking will clear off to a third party, and they'll be dependent on that third party to look at, provide the information in time of action and accurate to come back with their processing. But you're adding another complexity in there. So again, it's what you choose to do on mobile at this stage.
Your confidence to click that final submit isn't just there at the end. I think if the user experience has been good all the way through it, if it's been architected in a manner which, as I say, insulates against all these problems, then you might say, well, actually, I've got this far, I know what the cost is, and given the responsiveness that I've experienced up till now, I'm okay with it. But if you kind of had to press refresh a few times because you've lost connectivity or anything like that, then you're not going to do that. And people's perceptions and people are not going to uptake more on mobile platforms until the industry as a whole improves that experience up until that point.
It's full end to end.
Yeah.
It's not just you with the website or app provider. It's everything. It's the network, it's the hardware, it's the Wi-Fi,
So it's also about individuals' risk profile as well, isn't it? It's anecdotal, because I can't remember the figures, but I can remember going to a presentation last week, and I was saying that the Android was the main device that's out there, but the iPhone actually did more transactions, online transactions in the iPhone than the Android. And it was down to the fact that people that take the iPhone are more creative, they're more willing to try something new, do those transactions online. So it's more about the person and their risk profile. It also said, which I don't know how true this is, maybe it's just a presentation thing, that people with iPhones get more partners, but again,
No,
that's definitely not true. Yes, but iPhone anyway.
Yeah, but I think the genie's out of the bottle, it's not going to go away. So, and the thing that really gets me from a technological perspective is that the whole world's reinvented itself in the last 2 years. So now you've got business users who are bouncing up and down going, we need mobile, we need mobile, we need mobile, unless we're there, we're dead, we're dead, we're dead, we're dead, we're dead. Right? So now it's up to you guys to keep up with that, because all of a sudden it was, I mean this stuff that I was hearing years ago. It was like, if you sit in front of your computer and you don't get a response within 30 seconds, you abandon the transaction.
30 seconds? Which report were you reading?
That's how it was in 2002 when it was first started. That's all the statistics that were coming out, which is that the average attention span of somebody is this, that, and the other. Right? Okay. And now it's just all accelerating, and people coming up with new techniques to make things go faster and faster and faster, and use a different variety of devices which the general public are demanding. Right?
I think the timescales
you guys have got to keep up with it, haven't you?
Yeah.
That's your challenge.
I think the timescales that you illustrated kind of talking through mobile and tablets, that's shouted out for a response. It's shouted out for a response from developers, from IT providers, and that response is not necessarily considered or it might be a bit flippant, kind of just get stuff on. I know companies that have gone down the track of responding by putting on a very, very tailored website to mobile, found that was completely ineffective. Users didn't use it at all, so they just kind of pushed back and gone to their full site on mobile, and found that a lot more effective. But ultimately, you've kind of got this timescale where people don't have the time to think about a considered response to this opportunity and the risk. And what you're finding is people make decisions based upon fairly sound principles, but not optimal. And I think that's what we're seeing at the moment is a refinement of people's responses to the mobile challenge. And as people become more confident in using e-commerce and using the mobile for these other sorts of things, then we'll see kind of leaders and people using performance as a differentiator, as a feature on their site, rather than it just being a nice to have.
Colin, is there any demand out there for, the big performance tests, the sort of 50,000 concurrent users and upwards? When we do those, is there any demand on there to say, well, 10,000 of our concurrent users will be mobile iOS, 5,000 will be mobile Android, 25,000 will be standard web?
Yeah, I think given the kind of profile and the changing usage, you can't really assume that, especially around e-retailers that advertise on very specific things like television, which will be exposed to a great many people in a very short amount of time and may elicit a response from many people. And in the past you might think, okay, a TV advert, that's going to subliminally condition me to gravitate towards a brand. Whereas nowadays, you can actually do something, you can say, actually, I'm quite interested in that, and kind of dip down inside sofa and start to look at it. So absolutely it'll be the case that the profile of a retailer who advertises on TV, the devices will be skewed towards mobile versus the people who kind of get up to look at a desktop or maybe have a laptop nearby. So
this is exactly what we're doing where we work. So Shazam, you can now Shazam some adverts. You see the little icon on the screen. Sometimes you get a call to action, which is great. So advertisers pay us for our icon on their advert. And we also do some TV events, mainly in the US. So The Voice over the US, we had a campaign there, and so we get lots of hits in one go. And we actually kind of use Amazon Spike Server to kind of handle that load. But yeah, we're seeing different types of engagement from users depending on what kind of experience we will present to them once they have Shazammed that advert or that show. And yeah, we are seeing hits. I think the most successful campaign was the Latin Billboard Awards we did about 3 weeks ago. I think it saw about 50,000 tags in about 12 minutes. So that was good, and we're attracting more users, and that's getting higher and higher. But in terms of our performance, how we handle that, Amazon's spike circuit is just it's excellent.
Is there Graham alluded to it, but is there a potential performance overhead from mobile? So Graham's talking about drop connections and the connection to the server still being open, so that would be performance overhead.
Yeah, there are a couple of different things, mostly obviously centered around the network connections being kept open longer, things like packet loss requiring the server to send the same piece of information up to 5 times, as Graham said. You've got things like TCP window and kind of getting close, so servers are sending smaller packets of data across, therefore taking longer to deal with requests. So there are a multitude of things which will actually slow down and consume more resources on the server, and that was kind of the point that I was making when I was saying the load on the server when interacting with by mobile is not necessarily linearly proportional to regular browsers, because the network and the processing capacity of these things are significantly different to mobile.
Yeah.
So it's nothing. I mean, as well as user experience being different, you can't just stick your head in the sand around what load the mobile devices will stick on your server.
So what's happening in packet loss? Mobile device sends a message to the server and says, I request this information.
Yeah.
So the send that information.
So essentially what will happen is the server starts sending information, and the TCP stream will be sequenced, and it'll have like a buffer, and so it'll try to have all the numbers in the sequence, and if it's missing one and its buffer is full, then it'll say, well, I haven't received message number 43, can you reset that? And that's always happened on networks, on congested networks specifically. But when you talk about mobile and the advent of the 80% packet loss, you can very quickly imagine how much additional overhead that presents.
So there's an exponential rise in the messages flying back to forward to them.
I'm not sure it's exponential, but significant.
So I think it's potentially the way some of these applications are built. So, Harvey push technology, so we work with Test People, they test our technology, so we provide people like ICAP and those sort of guys to be able to train on mobile devices, so providing real-time data, real-time market data. But we have a technology that is very different to that polling or that request response. We're streaming that and we're intelligently distributing it, so we understand what the user is actually interested in looking at, what the technology is. We overcome the issue of bandwidth, and we just send out very small packets of data that provide this really good user experience. That's really what we do. So,
do you establish a permanent connection with the user?
No, it doesn't have to be permanent. So we have some patented technology that will reconnect, so we can disconnect. We have some tools that enable you to merge messages. So we break down the message into very small packets, and then we can merge those, because most of these mobile devices are threaded. So it's being able to provide a really good service. It's that idea of a snapshot and then a delta. So we see those deltas will change. So this is a technology I've been pushed for about just under a year, but people aren't aware of the technology that's out there.
But it's a great example of one of these technologies which insulates you against these problems around the network and gives you that confidence and general, because I mean mostly around web as well, you're talking about kind of getting enough content to display something to interact with a user, but there's also things like video, which again is a good example of a protocol which has probably been tailored to work in low bandwidth or poorer network conditions. There's still a cut-off point somewhere whereby kind of mobile video goes off.
Do you think that things are going so fast that the developers' heads are starting to spin because there are absolutely great solutions out there for some of these things and they don't even know they're there, even though...
Absolutely, and it's a complete login.
Just because it's happening so fast.
Yeah, plus we don't know what we can do.
Yeah.
So we're speaking to SIs and those sort of guys who are experts in their fields, different verticals that we focus on, cat markets again, pretty much. But transportation, travel could be another area where you're after a really excellent user experience on your device. So if you're looking to do something with full GPS bi-directional application, so we can actually do things on the device that traders can buy and sell. If you think about context, and you want to do things and get a confirmation quickly, or it's bi-directional, so you get that really fast. So it's the way that these applications are being built and the technologies are used to distribute the data and receive the data.
So like you're thinking, okay, somebody's got to trade, so there's a price there, you've got to get in quickly, you've got to get the price, otherwise your trade fails, and that's an obvious one. But then...
So things like gaming, so we play better. So we enable them to play better for most of the gaming companies out there. And it's all about speed of delivery. Another area getting involved is second screen. So I was going to ask companies involved, so probably Shazam, you guys are involved in that. But that second screen, you're watching Formula 1 and you're interested in Mercedes and you're getting real-time data on your primary device or secondary device. You'll sit there and view what's going on. So it's all about statistics of the stats of the engine. And then it's all about personalisation as well. So what's interesting to me, so I've subscribed, unbeknownst to me, but I've subscribed to a liking to Mercedes and receiving information on Mercedes. So we just pumping out that data when the changes happen. And then you can drill down into that data to actually understand what's going on. So I think, going back to the point, I think there are new technologies like ours that are out there that people aren't aware of, and they need to be more aware of what's out there so they can build their applications that will provide them that great user experience.
Do you find that there is an awareness that mobile apps perform worse than desktop apps?
Oh, yeah.
And I think some of it comes down to the way apps are developed, because a lot of organisations have gone down the agile development route. And in agile, people never know where to fit performance testing. Yeah. So what happens is you bang a load of sprints out, and then you maybe do a final performance test at the end, because you think you have to. But it's not integrated into the sprint.
Well, like agile is the way performance in agile.
Yeah. Go on. Segue.
There's a question you raised there, I'd like to pick up on the extreme mobile and talk about desktop apps. And I think there's sometimes maybe there isn't an understanding around people use mobile apps on unreliable networks and they use desktop apps generally on reliable networks. Sometimes it's not the app itself. So I was on a train in the morning, I never remember to put my money in the machine for the parking. So I'm sat on the train and now I need to pay for my parking. Whether it's a shopping website the parking provider gives me, whether it's a mobile device whether it's a mobile device or whether it's on a laptop, the fact that I'm accessing it over 3G network makes it very, very tricky. So it's not just the performance of the app itself. You know, you're taken away from the network and what's going on there.
I'm sure I agree with that. In my experience, quite a lot of performance issues on mobile websites is pretty much self-alarm. If you have half a megabyte of JavaScript, funnily enough, half of that actually tracking. Your performance.
That's completely agree with that. These bottlenecks, as you know what to do, if you can reduce the number of bytes on the wire and get a really good experience, why not do it that way? Rather than I just want that information, and then go back to the server, takes all the data, refreshes the whole screen, all this information you don't need. Why not just fire out the changes?
Or the number of bytes, the number of round trips as well. If you're doing that, you need to get all that JavaScript back in. huge number of HTTP requests back onto the forwards. Each one of those you get hit by latency, you get hit by the wrong vectors.
But do you see a demand from providers of these mobile apps on the different platforms to want to call for services to test them in all of these sorts of scenarios? And we've talked about some, I think, Neotys software, Neoload, you talked about essentially setting yourself up as an application and testing those functions. But if the application runs differently on different platforms, that's what you do, then it's the end user experience that counts. And something that Ash and I have spoken about, and is to replicate what the user's actually doing is the key here. And all those circumstances, I've had many things I've tried to buy something, buy a train ticket whilst on a train, and it just never gets all the way through. For all sorts of reasons. I want the app in my hand when the device is running to handle it. I don't really care what's happening in between as a...
And absolutely, one of the things
is there call for that kind of testing and thinking through all those scenarios, or is it just it works here with a good connection?
I think there's two sorts of testing going on this as well. You have so the server-side assurance around handling the requests. Can the server-side cope with 50,000 users accessing the same mobile devices? And then there's a separate question around what is the experience for the end user who doesn't care about the 49,199 digits. It's their experience with their device.
Completely, but isn't that part of that down to how the app has been written?
Absolutely.
And it's less to do with that, it's actually to do with the requirements. What is classified as important by the company? Is it the functionality, or is it what the requirement is the performance actual requirement of the application? So when you're talking about if what is important is completion of the transaction, that is my requirement, and that is what they design and develop. So then they'll test to that requirement. The requirements on specify the performance as the key driver for mobile applications. It isn't going to, from a testing point of view, you're never going to get that.
I completely agree with that, Harvey.
Is it possible to put intelligence into, I don't know whether it be the app or the server, which says I'm in there, low network reception area. Can I go to the low functionality?
This client 1 out of 49,000 is getting full. I will back off in terms of the amount of data.
Oh, just think about the information that's important. So if somebody's ticketing websites, for festivals or for gigs and stuff like that, and there's huge demand, they lose all of the images and stuff like that, and they put a sign up that says we're running on reduced functionality, and you can still book tickets.
But Andy, I'd still like to pick up on Carlos's point, which is it's what you said there is yes, you can blame the infrastructure, you can blame the network, you can blame all that kind of stuff, but at the end of it, you've also got to construct, you've got to write the application in a way which is optimal. This is maybe a more dinosaur, but I remember going to talk to an investment bank in 2001 and saying about that trading application and saying, how do you know that this will support 10,000 concurrent users? And they said, well, our expectation is that we'll support 5,000 concurrent users, but we're a very risk-averse organisation, so we've over-provisioned the server farm and the telecommunications network by 100%. So we've doubled the capacity, so everything will be all right, and so we don't need to worry about performance testing. And then we said, what's the problem with the app? What's the problem with there's a problem with the database? What if the index runs out of capacity or something like that, or there's a subroutine which is being coded incorrectly? All of the servers, all the bandwidth in the world is not going to rescue you from an absolute catastrophe. And they just went, not listening, because they just said, we've done our job, we've calculated that this amount of service and this amount of bandwidth will support 5,000 concurrent users, therefore we've doubled it, therefore we've done our jobs because we're a risk-averse organisation. And our view, and I personally believe it's true, is that most of the issues actually occur in the application, not in the infrastructure.
Following on that,
is that true for mobile applications in the same way as it is for mainstream IT technology.
So following on from what Carl said to that point, we learned that a lot of people use the Shazam app to understand what song is playing in a club or a bar. And often these bars are kind of underground or whatever. And that was we had a lot of users saying, I really love the app, but I can't use it unless I've got good 3G or 4G. And so we actually enhanced the application so you would be able to tag a song, and when you went back into connectivity, it would match it then. And so I think it depends what the audience is for your application, and I think you have to build it.
It's managing the circumstances, really, isn't it?
Exactly.
Back to Harvey's point, though, around requirements, I see a lot of clients who, when we kind of look at the reviews and monitoring or whatever, they're surprised at how many users are on mobile phones. So, never known the requirement prior to address a significant part of the market, they're surprised that so many people are using it on mobile phones. I had an experience the other day saying, well, it wasn't a mobile phone, but it was an Xbox or PlayStation 3. He said, do you do any optimization for big television screens? Do you do anything like that? He said, no, nobody uses PlayStation or Xbox. It's like, well, no, they are. You can see somebody in East Anglia right now is going through it, and they're not just looking at one screen. This person had been browsing product after product after product, kind of doing their research on what was probably quite an expensive product. So it kind of does happen, and but people are just not aware of it.
That kind of in-depth browsing, you signals that person is going to purchase, because they're not just a random browser, they're a research browser.
Yes.
So therefore, that sort of signals, you do need to put that in the requirements and design around the system, and its performance accordingly.
I think it makes a good point there, Cole, around TV. So we're talking about mobile, we're talking about desktop, we're talking about mobile now. There's a whole world around the corner in terms of smart TVs, in terms of set-top boxes, in terms of gaming platforms, which will offer the kind of services that you're getting nowadays on a mobile device. The proliferation of different devices that you need to support is just...
If you look at market leaders like Netflix, they've got the 10-foot guy, they've got the 4-inch guy, and they've got the 10-inch guy or something like that. So those are the kind of viewing distances for those platforms. So they've got dedicated people looking at user experiences at those distances. 10 foot for the TV, kind of 12 inches for the laptop, and then kind of 6 inches for the mobile phone. So all of those things are optimized for content, the user interaction, to make sure it's responsive and the right content is there. People don't have to kind of scroll in. At the moment, as I say, people are not designing requirements and not coming in for mobile, and I think the industry is relying upon the higher fidelity smartphones to be able to load things quickly, still putting up with networks, but then kind of allowing you to zoom up and interact with part of a screen, which isn't too much of a pain, but it does slow down your browsing experience. If you then kind of overlay that onto a £100 budget Android phone that you bought from Tesco with no contract, it's going to be a terrible experience, and perhaps that'll kind of come into the demographics of it, with people with iPhones shopping more because they have a better user experience than people on the low spec hardware. But
Netflix is a really good example in how some companies are integrating your experience. I think you raised the point that you wouldn't want to purchase something big on your mobile device. So what Netflix does is you could be in your office and you choose to watch a film. You could start to watch it on the app on the computer. You could then go outside, continue to watch that film, get home and synchronize it to start playing from when you stop on your TV. So it's a really good seamless interaction with the same product on multiple devices.
How do you do that? Not very, very good.
It is very good.
You don't have to know. You don't have to know how it does it. It just does it. And the biggest restrictions are within the user, potentially, of not really being able to appreciate that. You don't have to understand how it works. It can be done. Just go with it and do it.
I don't like to plan a route on my bicycle on my iPhone. But what I do is I log into Google Chrome. I map it out there, and then I go onto my Google Chrome app on my iPhone, and I can see my browsing history, my maps which I've saved, and it's just about kind of moving the experience wherever you are and whatever you feel most at ease in terms of interacting with it. And I think that's really cool, and I think kind of I'd like to see more of that.
But it is kind of scary, isn't it, when you kind of you map something in Google Chrome on your desktop and get a buzz saying you need to leave now to get to this destination. It's just like, how on earth? That's crazy.
Yeah, I downloaded, well, I didn't download it, a friend of mine downloaded it, a extension to Google Chrome. This is a really bad example of where it doesn't work for you. An extension at home where when you scroll through a web page, you get a fart sound, basically. And then I got to work, and I was in this meeting, and I logged into Google, and I started to scroll, it's like, sound, and it was really embarrassing. So it just shows kind of, sometimes you want to keep things apart, but it doesn't really smash them together. So I think, there needs to be some control.
So who are the leaders in the, would you say, in the mobile user experience? Not Roots Enterprise, no.
Google is probably leading it, I would say.
Not Netflix?
Well, Netflix is a very kind of, movies.
They do what they do, don't they?
Google is kind of reaches across lots of different areas.
I think there's a lot more consideration for companies who have got and developed in-house mobile applications and native applications for the constraints, because that's the environment in which they work in, that's the environment in which they need to customize and maximize the impression. I think the guys who are kind of laggards around that are the guys who come from web and web only, and perhaps the guys who didn't really consider what IE does to the web and the richness of it, and especially government and public sector things where they still support IE, and so I think there's a bit of a not a revolution per se, but I think in these organisations which are a bit behind the times, the users or the clients or their employees, they get such a good quality of mobile app outside of the enterprise. They can do things like book tickets, they can experience Netflix, they can do whatever they want. Then when they move back into the enterprise, their enterprise systems are antiquated and terrible, and it's like, well, and the users are starting to say, well, why can't we just do it like Facebook? Why can't we do it like Google? And then the answers from the IT department or the big vendor is, oh, very difficult. But isn't it difficult? It just needs more examples of like Netflix, like Google, like YouTube, to actually pressure improve experience across the board.
I heard an example of one when I was with Andy last week. I thought, wow, it was a tier 1 investment bank, naming no names, who wanted a better end user experience for their clients who were dealing in a certain aspect of their financial operation, and they did it on Facebook. They just set up a Facebook infrastructure. This is a tier 1 investment bank from Switzerland, who have now got a Facebook infrastructure for dealing with client account management in a certain financial product and using it for informing them of updates and enhancements to the product, and also dealing with client relationship management, i.e. receiving feedback from what they feel the experience is for this thing.
Instead of training they just...
And not only that, they don't want people just ringing up saying, actually, I tried to get an update on what my fund price was yesterday, and it took me 3 hours to get through and I didn't get the price. They're actually getting coming back from people going, like. So they know who likes it and they know who don't like it. And they're getting comprehensive feedback immediately, rather than going through some kind of call centre and so forth, and they're using Facebook for that.
The social media is a huge kind of game changer when it comes to support and interacting with the customers.
Social media is not even social in that respect. For me, I mean, that was a game-changing moment for me last week. I have to say, I've been talking about it lots of people. I'm going to tell you what investment bank, and then all of a
There's a lot
sudden,
of banks who use Facebook and tweet for unloading their clients. It's so cheap for them.
yeah, and it works because it's been specifically designed for community to communicate with each other and share information. All that stuff.
But it also represents a huge risk when we're talking about it in a performance engineering perspective, because ultimately, as I say, working with a client recently who spent a great deal of time and money on TV advertising campaigns, expecting yields from that and predicting numbers of people to come to their website as a result of it. The figures that you're talking about, tens, hundreds of thousands of users, that kind of shadowed or is shadowed by things like, was it Graham said, around Tesco offering an iPhone at £39. That sort of viral social media-led impact will be far more damaging to your infrastructure than the TV advertising.
And that's the bit they haven't thought about, which was that you've got all the functionalities there, and it's great. So it's got you can have people you can talk to, you can share comments, and you can get customer feedback, and so on and so forth. So that's great, and everybody's happy. And it didn't cost us anything to develop it because it's just there, and you use the internet, and it's free, and we're all happy campers. What if it doesn't perform? What if it doesn't perform? What if it doesn't perform? Then, who's going to get the blame? Is Facebook going to get the blame? Absolutely not. It's going to be the firm who set up the customer infrastructure in the first place who are going to get the right to kick in, because all of a sudden, right, they've now set an expectation of a certain level of functionality and end user performance that isn't there anymore. And now what are they going to do about it? And that's where I completely agree with you. So they've thought about the functionality, but they haven't thought about the performance.
Yeah, exactly. And then this organisation, it literally has teams of people sitting on Facebook, sitting on Twitter, interacting with people. And it's things like disruptive marketing, things that are being kind of super edgy around the messages. Those same people represent a significant risk to the infrastructure and a challenge to the IT department in order to accommodate all this good publicity, never alone the bad publicity that occurs. So it's a big challenge for them.
I think it's a question of how the engineering systems cope as well. So you can't predict if you put out an advertising campaign, you know you're going to get increasing on the site. But as you say, social media can cause interaction or something, mention something on TV which can just cause a huge uplift in the number of users on the site. I think we need to plan for that. So you need to say, well, this could happen. I can't scale my infrastructure to cope with this because I don't know what I'm going to get. So I need to make a decision on what the user experience is going to be for X number of users that I can support. Still continue to service those, but give the other guys something back saying we can't serve your request at the moment to protect some sort of service, because otherwise if you don't do that, the whole thing is just going to fall apart.
What you're saying is that if those business users have some kind of foresight, then perhaps they can come in and talk to their own internal people or people like you. No, I mean, this is not new. It was back in the 1980s, you had basically end-user organisations. Well, even earlier than that, in the late 70s and early 80s, you had end-user organisations. So at the finance department, and they would say, I want some form of financial reconciliation system and a particular report that I need. So they'd go to IT and say, great, you can have it in 9 months. And then what happened was like mini computers came along and all that kind of stuff, and then things like Sage and all that, and it was like, great, we can do it ourselves now. And now you've got customer services organisations saying, I can't work for IT to give me the interactive application with all the functionality and all that kind of stuff that I need now in order to do my job. I'm just going to be going to use Facebook because it's great, because everything works and it's all right. And it's the same thing as you go, no, I can't wait for my IT organisation to give me the functionality I want. It's available off the shelf, so that's fantastic. So functionality is sorted, it's all there. Is the performance there? And is the scalability there? And is the security there? I guess that's kind of relevant to what
Yeah, I
you
think
were talking about.
the Neotys was the 80s, you had all these lightning, you knew exactly how many users you had in the system, and then the internet came along and you then didn't know how many users got into your system.
And to be fair, the Tier 1 investment bank I'm talking about is thinking that they've got 2,500 users who trade this particular financing instrument, so that's fine.
But they're not going to get another 500 people without a huge amount of work.
But there are other applications where it could become.
I think there's a couple of things here. Everybody's talking about where we've been, but nobody's really talking about where we're going. I think that there's going to be some very big changes in terms of target audience, because there's a new generation that's going to now come through who always have the internet. They expect it now, expect it extremely quickly, and much faster than any of the stats on here. So their requirements are much bigger than now, and faster and bigger than everything. Really, it's got to be real time. And how can organisations start dealing with that? So when they come into the workplace, how they're going to deal with this new generation that has when you've got infrastructure, you've got applications that are slow.
I watched my 3-year-old with my smartphone, and never mind about the 2-second rule. It's like now essentially.
That's what trying, and also looking at sort of 12, 13, 14-year-olds. They're the same. Like this, they're going through their Facebook, whatever it is. And then Facebook's now they're losing what if they're going to other new social media applications. Once already they're there, I can't remember which ones they said, but people move away from the younger generation, move away from Facebook.
How much is that down to the performance of the apps, though, or the infrastructure behind it?
Two things I see their tolerance level is much less than ours, because we're used to starting with Netscape Navigator all the way up to now. And we knew that things were bad, and okay, it's acceptable, we see things improve. They know with some good applications and a good signal, they will get response in seconds, etc. They're not going to tolerate anything that isn't high performing. So the only sites and the only companies that will be a success are the ones that have made performance actually a key part of their strategy.
I think mobile web will die, and it will be purely driven by apps. I think you can build apps to be specific for you, to do specific functions, and mobile web or the internet will just be like one massive giant API that the apps just click into.
And not just apps, but all kinds of devices that
There's one big problem with apps. It's how quickly you can get an update out. You can broaden your website 100 times a day. You can increment business functionality, constantly run experiments. New functionality, you can't do that with apps. At the moment. Yes, so there's got to be a change in how apps are deployed.
Well, you can on Android, you can have your kind of phone set to auto update and it'll just pick it up. But iOS, you've got the kind of Apple approval process, which is at best a week, and it makes it a nightmare. So we just released a new iPad app. It was 6 months in the making. And we thought we'd caught everything, and luckily, touch wood, it's still the case. We didn't have to patch, but had we patched, it would have been at least a week. And in that week, you get, can you fix it? And that. So we were lucky. And it is a pain. It's a massive pain. But I think that will get shorter. I don't know. Or maybe the Apple approval process will go. There'll be something you can do on site.
How do Apple physically test apps? It must be fairly automated.
I think most of it's automated, but I have spoken to people at Apple who do actually look at it. I'm not sure what they do.
Do eyeball it in some way.
I think they need to make sure it kind of adheres to whatever
Dom, there's some really important thing you just mentioned, and that's on the updates. I'm really intolerant of slow updates, and I just cancel them if they don't update within a few seconds, because I want to get on and do something else. And how often are the updates performance tested? Is that ever included in the actual strategy of patching?
Yeah, so we have, I know you want to come on to this subject, maybe this is a good time to do it, I'm not sure, but our performance testing is as part of the continuous integration build, and if the performance test fails, the build is correct, we need to fix it. So our performance testing is right in there.
But the of the actual updates to the so how many other companies are doing that?
It's not many from what I've heard.
It's also outside of control. If you happen to be with a core network at the time and you're always updating yourself, and this is
Or you're with a full provider, everything everywhere.
you're out of action for minutes.
Well, you get some apps that won't allow you to update unless you're on Wi-Fi. Some you won't even be allowed to do it unless you're on Wi-Fi 10 plugged in. Yeah, those are
What I understand was that presentation last week, Microsoft, and they intend to have car insurance void by 2020.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they're in, I think it's about 16 different insurance companies producing an app.
Yeah.
So it's all just going to fit in your car, and it's going to be off your phone.
That's right.
But, I mean, that's got to be live data coming in.
I think it tracks it and then it sends it at some point in the day or overnight or something. I've got a friend who works for a company that builds applications in Guildford, and it's I think it kind of, it's not constantly sending the information to the insurance company. I think it does it in.
It's not just streaming.
It's like
What do you think we could get there?
it's
Where it would be
what's the insurance that has the comedian doing?
The VA.
Yeah, they've got that already.
Yeah, that's what it's saying.
It's there.
Microsoft.
Yeah.
But there are new protocols as well coming out for wireless that are being investigated, certainly in France by the tooling people, the people who own most of the roads in France. I think the protocol is called Weightless, which again is one of these sort of mythical wireless protocols that are kind of almost over there, which offers broadband speeds and low latency and all these good things. But you kind of can see that there are already cars out there, I don't know which one it is, but maybe a Ford or BMW that provides Wi-Fi connections for everything in the car. You've kind of, the new Renault cars all operate Android, which is developed by TomTom in Holland. So these things are going to connect more and more and more. And as you say, I think it's all around insulating, doing it asynchronously, whatever you need to do in order to provide a good user experience whilst actually servicing the requirement beneath it, is the way to go.
This could be a revolution in motoring. You could get rid of boy races. If it became a standard that you had that in every car and everything was monitored. Anyway, that's nothing to do with testing. It's just
anyway, it's almost 7:30, which is when we bring the sort of formal routing part of the session to a close. We've got some more time to finish up some more food, have another couple of drinks, do a bit of networking, carry on the conversations. Is there anything anybody particularly wants to throw onto the table for debate now before we wind this part of the session up, or are you very happy to move on to the networking and chat?
I just want to say I disagree with my Dominic in his assessment of apps versus web. We'll be discussing that over here.
And all I can say is I can't believe where we are now compared to where we were 2 years ago, and when I was allowed 2 years ago. So, all right, great. Well, let's there's no formal end to this. That's the sort of end of the roundtable chat and the formal questions and answers. But let's just carry on chatting and networking and have a